CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.
Welcome to yet another episode on Conversations on African Philanthropy with me, Bhekinkosi Moyo. I'm very excited today to be joined by two colleagues, mentors of mine, Ali from the Gerhart Center in Egypt and Ebrima Sall from TrustAfrica in Senegal. Ali is the Professor of Practice, but also the Director of the Gerhart Center on Philanthropy, Civic Engagement and Responsible Business. Ali, nice to have you here in Johannesburg.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. And Ebrima is the Director of TrustAfrica based in Dakar, Senegal, but also former Executive Secretary of TrustAfrica. Ebrima, nice to have you as well.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having us.
I want to start by thanking both of you for taking your time to join CAPSI in the strategy reflection sessions that have taken place over the last 3 days. It's really an honor for us to have the two big institutions in the continent, one academic, but the other, based on the Pan-African nature that TrustAfrica does, to join us and help us think through some of our activities. Maybe we can start early with you and talk about some of the work that you do at the center and how it interfaces with some of the stuff that you heard here from our colleagues.
Okay. Well, the Gerhart Center, we have three verticals, which is philanthropy, civic engagement, and responsible business. And under the three verticals, we do three activities. The first one is research, which is non-academic really. I mean, it's really more of field action-oriented research with the purpose of either changing mindsets, getting people acquainted about things, or showing cases from the MENA region. The second part is capacity building, which is basically training, but it's more either continuing education or training focused to NGOs, foundations, or other organizations interested in social impact. The last thing we do is youth leadership program, civic engagement. So we take youth, we put them in teams, and we help them to solve certain problems, and we do this in the form of competitions, and sometimes we pay seed funds for them to continue with it. Yeah. So this is basically in a nutshell what we do.
Yeah, and of course you are based at a business school, just as we are.
Yes.
And for us, one of the the key, it wasn't a challenge, but one of the misunderstandings, maybe to speak, was why are you located at a business school? I had to find myself explaining all the time. Did you face a similar challenge? Do you still face similar questions around why you are located at a business school and not maybe in humanities or public policy, centers in a university?
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing. I mean, I never get this question from responsible business.
Yeah.
Part of the stakeholders in the civic engagement are typically youth, and they're drawn to the AUC name, the American University in Cairo, which is a really good brand name. We have this problem with philanthropy.
Yeah.
Philanthropy, which is similar probably to yours. And then you just have to tell them, I mean, when you talk about civil society at large, I mean, philanthropic people are actually business people who made money and then they decide to use it altruistically. So you can see the relation between this and responsible business in one way or the other.
Yeah.
When we look at what philanthropic organizations or civil society organizations ask us in terms of training, it tends to be very similar to business. The only thing they need is cases in their specific case. They need project management, for example. They need talent management. They need financial controls. I could argue even M&E. I mean, there is a big part of it which is probably you could argue commercial. So there are lots of synergies that could happen by putting it in a business school.
Yeah.
It's also a trend. I mean, you find most business schools now having either, call it whichever way, social impact, social entrepreneurship, social, or even philanthropy outright.
Yeah. And Ebrima, I mean, you are listening to Ali and hearing some of these programs that they're working on. I know that TrustAfrica at the moment is also, not pivoting, but it's also going to be engaging a lot with young people across the continent. I already see and hear some synergies there, but maybe you can talk to us about TrustAfrica and its position in the continent and the work that you've been doing over the last couple of years.
Well, first, again, thank you for the opportunity. TrustAfrica, you know very well, for having been the program director for many years and contributing to the shaping of the programs of TrustAfrica. It was established with a view to contributing to the strengthening of African agency and fronting African agency in the search for solutions to the problems that the continent is facing and all the challenges. Problems of governance and democracy, problems of peace and so on. And then, which is a whole area of work from the beginning and still continuing. And then there are the problems of inequality, economic growth, and poverty and so on. So equitable development, broadly defined, a whole area. We do work from agriculture to higher education. And then there's the African Philanthropy itself. It is a philanthropic institution as a foundation, but it also takes keen interest in what is happening in the field. So it's a program area where we do a lot of things. So talking about the future and the challenges, of course, one of the big issues today is the fact that we are a continent that is populated by young people, predominantly. 2/3 of Africans are less than 25 and below, right? And that is not likely to change. In fact, if anything, this will be the continent that will remain the youngest in terms of the composition of its population, the makeup of the population. And it is going to be the continent that will concentrate with the home to a significant proportion of humanity going forward. By the year 2050, 1 out of every 4 human beings we meet on this continent, on the planet, will be African. And most of them young people. So addressing the challenges that the young people are facing, looking at finding them where they are, and connecting with them and working with them, to push forward the transformational agenda of the continent is really something that we should take very seriously. And that's what TrustAfrica is pivoting onto. It was an important area of work all along, but we are now going to take it as a central part of our work, and much of the initiatives we'll be launching over the coming years will be centered around young people. And their aspirations and how they continue to drive the change processes on the continent.
I actually look forward to seeing how, of course, there's the 3 of the institutions here, and we have programs on young people in the future. But I'm also interested to see how we will probably find ways of working, but also bring others who are working across the continent. But you see, Ali and I are situated in academic institutions, and at times we probably might miss a lot of issues that philanthropic organizations that are practitioner-oriented, like yourselves, might actually be looking at and thinking, but why are these centers not focusing on these things? So if you were to advise us here as centers that research, teach, and train on philanthropy, what would a philanthropy organization like TrustAfrica say, these are the key issues that you think you should be focusing on?
Well, first of all, personally, I spent much of my career in an academic setting, working with Codesria for many years. So I see the value of having a very strong, a very solid conceptual and theoretical anchor for the work we do everywhere. The clear, the conceptualization of the things we do, the more solid the epistemological foundations of the work we do are, the more we are likely to get to solutions that can work. Because I think the understanding we have of the issues helps in knowing actually what, and the deeper that understanding is, the greater the chances we have of getting to policies and practices and programs that actually can work in the context in which we are. So the work we are doing is very valuable, and it's complementary to the work that an institution like TrustAfrica and civil society organizations and all the foundations are doing in philanthropy and outside of philanthropy. I think we need these two to work together. One, because from the work that TrustAfrica is doing, we get insights into what is happening, and then it can feed research. You can draw the attention of research to areas where we need to think deeper about the issues. One of which is, for example, if you say the world will be more African going forward, what are we doing today to prepare ourselves for that kind of eventuality?
Yeah.
You know, what is it that how are the young people of today, you know, experiencing current problems or also projecting themselves in the future? So these are serious questions that, if you don't address them, we may be designing programs to say we are supporting youth, empowering them in one way or the other, or reform, you know, improving policies, but we may be missing something. You know? So I see complementarity in the work that your centers are doing and the work that TrustAfrica is doing. And I think that's why we, CAPSI and TrustAfrica in particular, have been initiating a number of things together. You know, we have been organizing this African Philanthropy Conference, where we bring together people from, you know, the policy communities, but also academics and civil society, to think together about what the challenges are and what we need to be focusing on, thinking about, and so on. So I think that complementarity is something that we should keep moving. So it kind of gives it gives practical sense to the research that has been done, and research can inform the practices that organizations are engaged in and the programs that we do much more effectively.
And maybe I could also ask you the same question and say, you know, for us now looking outside of universities, how do we see ourselves as centers collaborating with institutions like TrustAfrica and several others across the continent and beyond, who are also seized with the similar issues as us?
Okay. I'll address the question from 2 points. First, in Africa, most developing countries, we have a lack of, call it structural or infrastructural organizations. Those are pillar organizations in the ecosystem that would collaborate, that will trend setting, that kind of a thing. If you go across Africa and compare it, for example, to any individual European country, for example, or India, you'll be sort of lost. We need infrastructure organizations because they are a critical component of the ecosystem that is currently unstructured, that is currently needs a little bit more of a regimenting or governance. And those type of organizations are very critical. Now, when you talk about universities, in my opinion, universities, I mean, people always tell you university create knowledge and disseminate knowledge. This is the main purpose of university. But in the process, they forget that universities have a major role of producing social change agents. Youth. This is the main important product you have. And those are the people who are eventually, and I'm talking about a range, you get them from 18 until 2021. If you show them, if you try to sort of get them into the right mindset, which probably has to start even earlier than university, you are instilling, so you are starting a wave, you're starting a trend, you're starting a change of a culture which needs to happen. I mean, most of the things we look at, you tell you it's a mindset. Well, mindset, once you get critical mass of people with a similar mindset, then you get change in the culture, you get the trend. And that's what we're trying to do. You try to sort of be in a trend setting. Now, to do this, it's beyond any individual entity. You really have to collaborate. I know few things, I know little things, I have my biases, whether it's my own personal or the university or maybe even the whole country. And same with you, same with him. If we collaborate, I think we could do many, many, many things. So university is a nice setup in many ways. One of the problems we have with universities is that it tends to be a little bit elitist. I mean, even when you get people, you put them into university, they get a degree, they start thinking of himself as better than the others. So instead of actually feeling that he's responsible, there is a liability that comes with getting better chances in life, which has to be reflected in your role with the community, with the society. And I think we always fail in conveying this to the students. That's why if you ask me what is the most important thing we do in Gerhart Center, it's all about youth. Now, we do research around youth. We do research to get people to start thinking in different ways.
So maybe, following up from that point, what would be some of the key, areas that you would say in your existence, these are the key impact areas that the Gerhart Center has touched on?
Well, I'll tell you, like anybody else, we used to be very projecticized. If you look at it in another way, we've been mercenaries.
Yeah.
So somebody would pay us money, we'll do whatever they want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lately, we started to think it's like, we shouldn't be doing it this way. We should have a little bit of a clear direction that reflects a certain moral standing, that reflects a conceptual standing. And we try to go and seek or get people to get into this kind of a thing. Now, I'll have to admit, initially, of course, because you're changing, people don't know what you're doing, we still need to sort of reposition. It causes a little bit of drying in resources.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in the long run, this is the right thing. So if you ask me what are the things we're doing, I think we started to target things. Our most recent thing is about, for example, responsible finance.
Yeah.
Everybody, when they think about responsible finance, they tend to be camps. So there is a camp of foundations, where there is a camp of investors, and they probably have many sub-camps in each one of them. They don't talk to each other. So if you try to tell them it's actually synergy, it's a journey.
Yeah.
And you can see, if you actually collaborate together, even at a small scale, it's more efficient for everybody. The other thing we're trying to do is, I'm not a political science, but if I use the word democratize, democratize incubation or innovation. Innovation currently, when you do it in a university, again, it's very elitist. Somebody will do it in a lab with the intention of patenting it, and then it's extractive. There are many, many forms of innovation which tends to be more grassroots, which tends to be more open, where the intention is to solve pragmatic problems. And frankly, most of those guys do not care if you're going to share it with others. Incubation. Who said incubation has to be in the university? I've seen it in many places. You take them, they're very much attuned to the needs of the society, and then you put them in the bubble with you. And then you reprogram them, and then look at them 2 years later. They're all, it's an assembly operation producing the same kind of a product, and they lose contact with the community that they were coming from, which, interestingly enough, this is what made them appealing to you in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you try to sort of, maybe you should do incubation there. We've tried 2 experiments, they're working well, but again, we try to expand it more. Of course, the problem is, if I do that at the university, it's one size fits all. It is very standardized. They'll have to jump and fit the mold that I'm having.
Yeah.
The other way around, no, you're gonna go there, you're gonna try to study different examples, you need to have a typology, and then it takes lots of effort and lots of research.
Yeah.
And you can see the publications or the research, so people are drawn into those kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are the things we try to sort of change a little bit.
Yeah.
What we do.
Yeah. And Ebrima, TrustAfrica is known for many things. For setting agendas, for convening different partners. You've been in the space of, equitable development, agriculture, like you said, democracy, philanthropy. What would you say as TrustAfrica, and you just came out of your own strategy session, what would you say are the new frontiers that TrustAfrica is going to be, tackling going forward?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you just give 1 minute back to the earlier conversation on the knowledge production and the centers. It's TrustAfrica has also been engaging in that field. Now it's known that the universities are not the only places where knowledge is produced. It's recognized, actually. It had always been like that, but at least now it's recognized that there are several sites. So there's been an interest also in knowledge generation and management, and making sure that there is a rethink of practices and policies and politics and so on. I think where we are now, what we are saying, is that so much is changing in the world today, and that's why we chose the theme of the last African Philanthropy Conference to be philanthropy at an inflection point, because the world is at an inflection point. It cannot be, business as usual is out, otherwise it will be a disaster. Yeah. So there's a need to change, to pivot into new ways of doing things. Secondly, there's actually a need to reimagine the future in a very radical way. There's a need to, if only because if you look at the demographic realities that we'll be facing, the world will be more and more African, and so on and so forth. And the transformation processes that we've been seeing unfolding will continue. It's climate, it's technology, and so on. Secondly, what that means also is that there's a need to reimagine politics. There's a need to reimagine economics, sense, right? And so our current strategy, was framed under the idea of contributing to the shaping of the future we want for Africa. And that will continue to guide us going forward. So we're going to work a lot more on the youth. It will become a much more central area of work, if only because of what we are seeing now happening. They've been driving change processes in politics. Many of the changes that have been happening around the continent have been driven by the youth. We see how they're dealing with the technology. We see how they're creative, how their horizons are broad, and finding an answer to, or at least connecting with the youth and working with them to find answers to the problems that we are facing will be very important. So youth will be central in what we are doing. We'll be working on the climate issues much more systematically. We've been addressing climate issues from in a tangential way so far. We are going to design a program on climate. We have a new initiative that we've started reflecting on and will be central, and we are saying that actually the whole issue of philanthropy itself needs to be reimagined on the African context. Right? So we are begun collaboration with a number of institutions, leading one of which is Urgent Action Fund Africa, and we launched an initiative called Reimagining Pan-African and Feminist Philanthropies, looking at different angles. One is, what are the needs of African philanthropies? We need to graduate into new ways of working. We need to be stronger institutionally. Many of the ecosystem is fragmented. The philanthropy ecosystem is fragmented. A lot of institutions, there are a couple of big ones appearing and are doing quite well. There are a number of institutions that are struggling actually to establish, struggling with their resourcing challenges, struggling with infrastructure issues. We also have the whole issue of the narratives that are going with philanthropy and the practice of philanthropy globally and within the African continent itself. So we're going to work on philanthropy as an area, and with a view to making sure that several things happen. One is to have the proper infrastructure, and Beki, we are working with CAPSI on this one, looking at models that exist of organizing in the philanthropic field, what kinds of funds and endowments could we think about setting up that will help in mobilizing massive resources, because we need to have a change in the scale of the operations that we have. At the same time, too, we need to run them in ways that connect with the values that are informed by the values that we've been upholding. It's Ubuntu, it's about solidarity, it's Pan-Africanism, it's social justice, and inclusivity and so on.
Yeah.
And we also need to make sure that what is in philanthropy today, all the discussions about the need to decolonize philanthropy or to localize, are taken on board in the way we work, so that we have much better and healthier relationships with our partners around the world, but also with the communities we work with the movements we work with, social movements that actually are the basis for the legitimacy of everything that we do. We are part of that community. We'll connect better with the community, get them to be playing central roles in everything that we do. So philanthropy will be one other big area. Of course, the issue of the African space itself, how do we make sure that Pan-African transformation and integration moves forward, and moves forward in a very decisive way, working with all the actors who matter, the big players and the smaller ones, but also making sure that it happens in ways that see the African citizens as the center, as the starting point and the end of whatever it is done.
Yeah.
It should be Pan-Africanism driven by social justice as it has been historically, connecting with the vision of people like Kwame Nkrumah, Sekanda Job, Malcolm X, and all the others who have been there around, and NASA, and others who have been working to make sure that we come together. Yeah. We create a strong African community that can command respect within the continent and outside of the continent. And we also will continue working on the governance of African resources, so that African resources serve Africa primarily before they become, resources that are just being extracted and pumped out and in illegal ways, illicit financial flows are making us lose tens of billions of dollars every year. Nearly $100 billion are lost to the continent every year. So we need to stop the bleeding, of African resources, of African minds, of African youth. Trying to migrate in risking their lives across the Mediterranean or in the Sahara Desert every year. So the bleeding has to stop. But once the bleeding stops, it also means that we need to make sure that we create the conditions for people to live well on this continent. At least not as TrustAfrica alone. We create a movement, we participate in that process, and we'll push for that process to become much more important going forward. So that we make Africa a continent where it is actually nice with the realization of the dream that is, the vision that is captured in Agenda 2063 of the African Union. It's really something that will be guiding us going forward.
I'm actually glad that both of you actually attended our session, especially, all the sessions, but especially today's session, where we're looking at our modules and trying to make them, relevant to society. Because a lot of the issues that you're talking about are things that we are trying to teach and train on. And so it would be very useful going forward to see how we bring those issues, especially the practical issues that you are working on, into the classroom. But at the same time, how we can also invite people that you interact with, yourselves and others, to also come and be part of the resource people and people that are teaching. Equally so, those that come out of the teaching, what do they do when they go back in society? So we are about to really wind up because we've run out of time. But in most cases, we hear of these big names: TrustAfrica, Gerhart Center. We hear of Ali, we hear of Ebrima. But there's a person behind that. So Ali, what is it that led you to end up in philanthropy?
Listen, I finished my PhD, then I went into software companies. The first one was actually more of a boutique consulting. So we develop software and we tell people how to go about solving certain problems. That was in the US. When I came to Egypt, it's a different world. I was trying to solve with the same mindset, US, and then you realize the problems are much basic. And you'd have to sort of solve the basic problems. Things like, for example, control basic financial controls about the flow of goods, a flow of inventory. In the US, nobody thinks about this because it's a given. In most developing countries, it is a fact. So anyway, you start getting into this. Then I ended up in the Ministry of Trade and Industry, where we had problems in, for example, absenteeism or people dropping jobs. And the usual, we have economists who tend to think about it from an economist point of view. They never thought to sort of think about it from a social point of view. The problem you have, most of Africa, most of the developing world, we don't have a long-term view. We don't have a savings mindset. So start getting into culture. When I started teaching at the university, I was very much excited about India in terms of frugal innovation, in terms of how they go about democratizing things. Very, very interesting ideas. So when the Gerhart Center was going to move to the School of Business, they thought, here is the guy who's going to be able to do it. And I think it was more of, not because of my philanthropy background or my civil society background. I didn't have any. But anyway, I'm a consultant. So I every 4 or 5 years, maybe even less, I jump. And it's interesting, when you jump, you bring with you different views about things, and you can see similarities. It's the same laws of physics that cuts across. So anyway, this is how it ended up. And it's been very fruitful. I've been in the Gerhart Center for 5-6 years. It's been very educational for me. And sometimes I say views that people initially they're like, what are you saying? And just think. And it's like, hey, you do something, it makes perfect sense. So it's the outsider view of things.
Thank you. And Ebrima, the same question to you.
But actually, first of all, I think we were, all of us, in philanthropy before we know that we were in philanthropy, practicing it in the first place. I think that's like true of most Africans, I would say. But for me, the most important thing is Africa, right? I've been, as a student, I was active in the student movement, was at one point Secretary General of the Gambian Students' Union in France, interested in everything related to Africa, participating in, we are a member of the Federation of Black African Students in France. Then spent a lot of time working with African immigrants in France, struggling with them, in their struggles to get decent accommodation, papers, and so on. And then, I worked for 2 years running a center that was coordinating a network of self-managed peasant organizations running microcredit schemes. So it was really an eye-opener in terms of looking at the impact of different issues we're talking about, structural adjustment at a very close range. But more important is I spent a lot of years at Codestria, was a program officer, then head of research, then executive secretary. And one of the big challenges to research on the continent is money to support our research. It was actually disheartening to see the extent to which African intellectuals, we are determined to look at the world from where we are, to be independent and bold in the way we look at the world, we understand contemporary challenges that the whole world is faced with. Doing everything for that, challenging the colonial library, into the decolonial debates, pushing Pan-Africanism intellectually and otherwise. But limitation, big one, is the financing of it. So you spend your time going after one funder, then another one, then small monies here, little monies there. And I saw that as a big limitation. We were collaborating with TrustAfrica when I was at Codestria. Becky, the program director, we organized conferences on many issues, from democracy to many other issues. So when I finished my second term as executive secretary, was on a sabbatical for a time. Then I had the opportunity to work with TrustAfrica. So I said to myself at that point in time, look, you know what? There's an absence of an important, independent Pan-African financing facility that supports the work that we all feel is very important. It is research, it is civil society, it is transformation, it is so many things. And TrustAfrica was in that field. So I felt, look, okay, well, if I can contribute to making this thing happen, creating an important, independent African institution that will be in philanthropy, that will do other things, but that will enable us to resolve, and it's one of the big challenges we are faced with. It's not financial dependence. There are other kinds of dependence, but that one is also very critical, and it conditions a lot of other dependencies that we are, or it helps in reproducing them. The work that we don't have an independent agenda and so on and so forth. So anyway, it was an attraction to work with these institutions I've been collaborating with, and help participate in building it up and making sure that it can contribute, even if it is in a small way, to creating the basis for our independence, for our sovereignty. At every level. And so, I said, okay, let me jump. It's still the same issues I've been dealing with while I was at Codestria. But probably the emphasis is what has changed. Less on the research side and more into how do you make sure that the connection with the research and all that, is common. And I think the point you are making about collaborating and moving in all directions, getting your students to spend time in institutions like TrustAfrica and civil society and other spaces is very important, and at the same time to exposing people in civil society and in social movements to the work you're doing, to get them to spend time in your centers would help greatly in everything from the deepening of the understanding of the issues to a lot of other things.
So let me thank both of you for taking the time, firstly to join us in your capacities representing your organizations, but secondly, in your capacity as advisory board members of CAPSI. We really appreciate your time, and we thank you so much for the valuable insights that you have given us since we were established, but more importantly, over the last 3 days. So thank you so much. That was Awni and Ebrima Sall joining us here at the margins of our retreat as CAPSI staff and advisory board members. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.